We're here today to talk about the upcoming series this fall entitled H2O, the theme of water in the Gospel of John. I'm Warren Weeks, Minister of Education and Administration here at Woodburn Baptist Church, and this is Pastor Tim Harris. And Brother Tim, as we're talking about the upcoming H2O series, just wonder if you could give us a quick overview about what you had in mind when you were thinking of the H2O series. We're sitting here in front of the baptismal pool, and when we think of water in church and preaching, we always come back to this. But what were you thinking when you thought about H2O?
Well, I'm always looking at my preaching plan for the whole year, and I like to make sure that at least twice we stop and really drill down into a particular Bible book. And as a congregation, we go through a book verse by verse. Earlier in this past year, we did the book of Esther, which was Old Testament. And I wanted to make sure that we also had a New Testament emphasis, a New Testament book. I simply felt led to the Gospel of John. And so I just started reading the Gospel of John and reading it to see how God would speak to me first. The Gospel of John is interesting because it has a lot of stories that everybody already knows. A lot of favorite verses we find in the Gospel of John. And so, in some ways, the Gospel of John feels like a home to all of us because it's familiar. But I also wanted to read in order to find something new, something fresh for myself, and then something also important for the congregation. I just became very struck with the way that at any place in the Gospel of John where you really begin to look, where you begin to drill down, you find water. It's just interesting, and that's how it started for me. Just the interesting way that in every passage, every story, every place, somehow John is going to work that theme of water into his story about Jesus. That's where it started for me, and that's how we came to the title H2O. Just simply looking at the way John portrays Jesus in terms of water.
How would you suggest that maybe we go ahead, we can prepare our hearts ahead of time for the H2O series?
Well, I would encourage you and everybody to prepare just by reading the Gospel of John. It's not that big of a read. It's easy to read. Lots of times it's the Gospel of John that we give to brand new Christians, but because it is so very basic. But I encourage you to read and look for water. Just notice how in every turn of the page, John's going to come back to water. He's going to start out on the banks of the river with John the Baptizer. The whole gospel begins with the baptism. It starts with water. Chapter 2, Jesus is going to be at the wedding. And then ultimately, he's going to change the water into wine. Again, there's water again. Chapter 3, he's going to encounter a man at night whose name is Nicodemus, and he's going to tell him that unless you're born of water and of spirit, you can't see the kingdom of God. Chapter 4, he's going to meet the woman at the well, and on and on and on. And he just continues to come back to water. So I think for us, the fun part, but also the challenge, is to look at all of the ways that John uses the theme of water and then just begin to ask, what does this mean? He's obviously trying to say something about Jesus. And so the responsibility for us then is to ask, what's he saying? How does this particular image or symbol of water point us back to Jesus? What does it say about Jesus himself?
What do you want us to come away with from the H2O series?
I have no purpose other than the very purpose that John himself states for his gospel, and that is simply that people would believe, that their faith in Jesus himself would be strengthened. As I've said, everything about John, everything about the gospel is simply intended to point back to Jesus. When John speaks of Jesus in terms of water, he has this climactic moment when Jesus is at the festival, at the temple, and he stands and he shouts, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink." Obviously, John is trying to say that Jesus is that source of living water, that thirst in every human soul is a thirst that will only be quenched in relationship with Jesus himself, who is the fountain of living water. So the carry away for all of us is simply going to be to bring us closer to and back to the source of water for our souls, who is Jesus, and in seeing him in a new and fresh way to find our faith in him strengthened.
Well, thank you, Brother Tim, for giving us some insight into the H2O series today. We said earlier H2O is coming this fall. We encourage you now to begin reading the Gospel of John, looking for that important theme of water and how he uses that as you prepare your heart to hear these messages. Also, we have 4 special Sunday school lessons we'll be doing with youth and adults during this time. And so I encourage you to be prepared for H2O coming this fall.